Hey guys, this is Phil Galfond for BlueFirePoker.com, and I'm picking up where I left off last week with this four tabling session. I have two PLO tables on the top, 510 deep with an ante, and on the bottom I have a 510 no limit table on the left and a 3-6 no limit table deep on the right. I'm not going to go back into my whole um, explanation about why you should be learning multiple games, but I do think it's very important, and if you want to hear me talk about it again, you can rewatch the first video. Here on the top left, I decided to lead with my wrap. Uh, if we were 100 big blinds deep, I'd be much less likely to do this, just because getting raised in this spot with 100 big blinds is really ugly and a lot more likely than with 200 big blinds. With 200 big blinds, there are not a lot of legit hands he can be raising me here with, or that people do raise me here with. So I don't expect to get raised that often, and when I do get raised, I expect it to be a bluff a large percentage of the time. And then I can call with a lot of equity against his legit hands even, and probably take it away on later streets. But the main reason I lead is just because I expect him to call. I expect him to fold a decent amount of flops, but I expect him to call with a hand like kings most of the time, or 7xxx, and then on most turns I expect him to fold. So the way I expect this hand to play out with the lead is he will be calling the flop, folding the turn a ton of the time. So I pick up a decent amount of money that way. And that is an important thing to think about. More in PLO, I think, than no limit it comes up, but just how things are going to play out on future streets rather than just your equity on this street against their range. But back to the hand. The thing about two-tone boards like this is that wraps go down in value quite a bit. On a rainbow board, a wrap is extremely powerful because you can never really be in bad shape. But on a two-tone board, if you're up against some kind of hand like two pair plus flush draw or over pair plus flush draw, even, you're just not in very good shape. The flush draw really kills your equity just because it takes away a handful of your outs, and then he also will have redraws if you do hit your hand. And I hit my straight. I decided to bet the turn. I think check calling against certain types of players is a good play, but against the majority of people that are not going to be firing turns and rivers light, you're not inducing many bluffs there. So I'd rather just go for value. And I don't expect to get raised on the turn as a bluff often at all. And same goes for the river. I think there's a lot of value. And I should go ahead and make the value bet with second nuts. Alright, couple hands going on. On the top right, I 3-bet in position with a pretty weak double suited hand. This is a very weak double suited hand, but you can't really go wrong 200 big blinds deep in position with like anything remotely playable, unless you're up against just a hyper aggro, very, very good player. And I don't really know much about this player. But it just plays. It's so much easier to be in position this deep. They can't really be check raising many flops at all, or turns. So you just get the ability to either check back a lot of flops or turns that work well for you, as well as bet a lot of them that they'll have to fold on, and bet the ones that you nail. And basically, you get to control the pot very well in position, and deep stacks make it a lot more valuable position, that is. And on the bottom left, I decided to 4-bet. I opened with 9s in the cutoff, and I don't know this player. I've seen his name before. I'm pretty sure he's a regular. Don't know how aggressive a regular, but I think most of the 5-10 regulars are 3-betting pretty wide in this position, and 9s, though it plays okay, calling, I think it plays a little bit better to 4-bet and get it in. And with these aggressive games, I would like to have a wide 4-bet range, both for value and for bluffs. So I like to include 9s and 8s, in certain spots in my 4-bet calling range, just so that they can't be 5-bet bluff shoving profitably in a lot of spots. So here on the top left, he calls me, and he did have the same hand as me, second nuts, and he had the club redraw, so I was in bad shape. I was in bad shape the whole hand, actually. I like the way he played the turn and river, but I really dislike his flop call. I think that it's pretty much a mandatory flop raise. Given that, I think that he should be raising a lot of air on this flop when led into. and this is pretty much the top of his range, with the exception of a set of sevens. I think this is the next best hand, pretty much. I mean, I guess if he had a wrap to go with his aces and a flush draw, but within reason, this is like the ultimate top of his range, and just plays well against anything at all. Against a set, he's got his two aces, he's got his flush draw, he's got his gutter, and against anything else like my hand, he has me completely crushed. And even against two pair, like a lot of people in my spot could lead two pair and then just fold to a raise. Why not just take me off a hand that has, 50% equity or somewhere around that, that can't stand any heat? Basically, his hand just crushes almost anything, any reasonable range. And if I do have a hand like kings with clubs or something like that, or like even better, like king 4-5 with clubs that I'm getting in, he completely crushes that hand and needs to force more money into the pot, in my opinion. But the rest of the hand he plays well. So here in the top right, I flop an open-ender, backdoor flush draw. And I do have the 7-10 gutter, but that doesn't give me any more outs. It just improves my straight if I hit. I check behind because it's a very drawy board, and one that he can be check raising a lot, and it's one that I do not want to be check raised on. I mean, I never, without a very strong hand, want to be check raised, but this is one that a lot of turn cards improve my hand. I do have the open ender, and then I have the hearts, which would give me a very strong draw on the turn, so I'd hate to miss my opportunity to see the turn. So I take a free card in position, and he half pots the turn, or just under that. And this is a very standard call for me. I think that he can be doing this with a lot of weak hands. Certainly he can have a flush, but I'm getting a pretty good price. He can have a lot of air. He can have like a one pair, two pair type hand, or an open ender or something like that. And I think that I just very credibly rep a flush when I call the turn here. So I think that most players also make the mistake of, not necessarily a mistake, but they give their hand away a lot in his spot, where they will check the river when they have a hand like, I don't know, a set of sixes here, and then bet with all of their flushes to get value. And I think you need to be checking with a decent amount of flushes here, just to prevent people from being able to play the way I played this hand against you, so people aren't as confident about your hand range. So I don't need to bet very big here on the river, just because I very credibly rep a flush, and it's very unlikely he has one, so even with my flushes, I would bet kind of small, hoping to get a hero call. Yeah, so I think that's a good play, all around by me. And he surprised me here. He called with second nut flush, and I'm in some ways impressed a lot with his play. I really like that he's able to make a smallish turn bet and check the river with a hand this strong. I think most people are not capable of having that in their range. But I really don't like that he didn't check raise the river, just because of how extremely unlikely it is that I have nut flush, and how likely it is that I just have a flush myself and a lower flush, and could find a call against him. Granted that I'd probably fold a lot of my flushes here had I been check raised, but he should. This is kind of hard to say. Like, if we played together a lot, he should be check raise bluffing this river enough that this is a clear check raise for value with a second nut flush. Main reason being, almost all of my hands that contain nut flush draw on this flop will be betting, because I'll likely have some other piece. If I have any pair plus nut flush draw, I'm going to be betting the flop and getting it in, or even like a gutter and nut flush draw. So the only nut flush draws I check behind here are the ones with no pair, no draw, other than nut flush draw. And then on the turn, when he makes a less than half pot bet, a lot of the times I'm going to be raising my nut flush draw, almost all of the time actually, just because I'd expect him to call with almost any flush, given that he'd find the excuse, well, I bet small and showed weakness, and now Phil might be bluff raising me. So I think it's very unlikely I show up with the nut flush here. Very, very unlikely. And that combined with my smallish river bet, which I am capable of doing with the nut flush, but still makes it that much less likely. So I really love his river check, but I think he needs to check raise there. And here on the bottom right, I make a very loose call on the button. Two min raise with 8-5. Obviously, the thing is, this is from what I can tell, the very weak spot at the table, and I want to be playing as many pots as possible with him, and especially in position. This is a flop where it's very unlikely to hit many hands at all. So I decided to make a small raise, and I think that um, I'm obviously not taking him off of any pair because he's not that type of player, but I think that he's not going to be the type of player that is going to 3-bet bluff me or float with like a king queen type hand. So I think that it'll work all the times he has air. On the turn, I check behind because I think it's very likely he has a pair when he calls flop and is not going to be folding the turn. So I just take my free card. And on the river, I don't expect to fold out any better hands. So I just check it down. And he does have Jack 10 there for top pair. But I still do like my play, all in all. Okay, I just paused the recording for a second there because I noticed some lagging, so I closed a couple of programs. Hopefully that'll fix it. Yeah, I think I was just finishing up talking about my hand on the bottom right here. I think that I'm probably repeating myself now because I lost my train of thought. But basically, the flop raise was intended to get him off all of his unpaired hands, and then the turn and river play were consistent with that. Just given the assumption that he's not calling very often on the flop without a pair, so no reason to bluff the turn, or definitely no reason to bluff the river when I hit third pair. Here on the top left, it's a pretty loose open with 9-6-4-3 with the 6 high suit. There's a little bit of connectivity. I would open it on the button. 200 big blinds deep. I open almost everything on the button. I shouldn't say almost everything, but quite a lot of hands. But nobody's been fighting back that hard, 3-betting me, so I think that I can get away with an open there. It still looks like we're lagging a little bit, but hopefully it won't turn out as bad as I think, or as it looks for me on the video. So I'm not really sure what else I can close. Actually, hold on, I'll try one more thing. Okay, hopefully that helped a little bit. Probably not. Sorry if it is lagging. I'll look at that after this video is done next week. It's actually the same problem I had like a month ago, and I had it fixed by Geek Squad. But hopefully it's not happening again. I think last time what happened was just my hard drive was too full. But that's not the problem this time. Here with Queen Jack offsuit, really easy call when I'm playing against a weak player, especially because the big blind didn't 3-bet queens before. I don't expect him to be squeezing often at all here. And when I hit top pair, I think leading plays best here. If I check to Mr. Cup, who bets, I'm not really comfortable raising. First of all, because I'm not really comfortable getting it in with him. I haven't really seen enough from him to suggest that he'd be getting in like ace 10 here, or like 3-bet bluffing with gutters and then folding. So I'd rather just basically check, and I can't, sorry, I can't also check raise. I mean, I can, but I also don't want to check raise because I'm a little afraid of the big blind who could wake up with a hand. Not a huge concern, but a little bit of a concern. Anyways, I decided to lead. It puts the big blind in a tough spot, which, when I have top pair is not necessarily something I want to do, but with my range as a whole, I want to be putting him in a tough spot. And I think Mr. Cup might call with a lot of hands that he would check behind. Some gutters and 10, or like pocket 7s, things like that. So I think it gets value that way. Here on the top right is an interesting spot where I have kings, and we're a little bit deep, but I'm just very confident that, first of all, having the ace blocker is huge here. It makes it a lot less likely that he has pocket aces. But when he 3-bets from 40 to 100, I think it makes it a lot less likely that he has a very big hand. Very big meaning aces. I think he has a decent hand, but unlikely to be aces in my opinion. That combined with the fact that I have an ace in my hand. So I can just 4-bet here. And I hate to get shoved on by either of them, but I've committed myself at this point and expect to be in decent shape against most hands. Or, ahead of anything except aces. I get 2 callers, which is a little bit ugly, and hit a very, well, probably a very nice flop from me. Second nut straight, and back to our flush draw. For a minute, I considered checking, um, just because I think that Vivek will likely shove any pair here. And that puts Haralabab in a tough spot. And he potentially could get in, a dominated hand like queens or something. But I don't think they expect me to be 4-betting very often at all without aces. And if I had aces here, I'd be shoving. So I think I have to shove and rev aces and hope to get a call from um, I don't know, I guess 8-7-6-4 or something like that from Haralabab, or maybe something with less outs like Ace King Jack 4, just because that has, or like King Queen Jack 4, something that has enough equity against aces to get it in. Here on the bottom right, I bet again with my top pair, which now turned an open ender and a 1-card flush draw, and I get min raised by Mr. Cup, and I have no idea what that means, but I think that a large part of his range is going to be a flush here, just because he hasn't shown much aggression at all without made hands. But I think it's definitely possible that he's doing it with some kind of 2-pair type hand, or something like some kind of flush draw that he turned, like maybe ace jack with an ace or a jack of spades, just something weird. And then there's always the small chance that he's just spazzing out with some weird hand, like 10-8 or something, or pocket sevens with a spade. Because I don't really know enough about him to know how he reacts with those hands, and he's definitely, from what I know, it's certainly possible that he's just a maniac and doesn't have too much rhyme or reason to what he's doing. So I think a call on the turn is mandatory, and on the river I might have to make a tough decision. River's a brick, which I'm not really sure that's a good or bad card for me. And it goes check check, and he did have pretty weirdly played King 9. It actually, it's not a terrible play. I'm going to be folding a lot of hands there, just because I think that his range is very strong. But I had a pretty strong hand myself. So that is a spot where my flop lead got him to call with a weak hand. That I don't know if he would check that behind or not, but I suspect that he might have checked that back on the flop. And here again on the top right, I'm 3-betting in position with a weak hand. Or actually, was that a 3-bet or did he limp? Either way, same thing. 200 big blinds deep. We're now at 250 big blinds deep. Just there's nothing he can do about anything. Basically, he can hope to have a premium hand and be able to 4-bet me. And by premium, I don't mean just aces, but King, Queen, Jack 9 double suited type hands play well to 4-bet there too. Just because you decrease your stack to pot ratio, which is the main thing that gives you a disadvantage post flop, and it plays very deceptively. And I'm going to be I have a very wide 3-betting range there, so just in terms of value and playability, his hand's going to be much better than mine on average. And if he does run into aces, he can call a 5-bet, or call a 5-bet and not be in very bad shape. So, I mean, I guess the running theme of things you've noticed me doing so far is trying to play pots with Mr. Cup on the bottom right table, and on the top tables in PLO, trying to play pots in position and trying to 3-bet in position. Um, and those are really the two of the most important things, in my opinion, um, in any game, in at least the big bet games, which is all I really consider myself an expert in, but I'd imagine in other games too. Um, Playing pots in position and playing pots against weaker players. I think, especially when people start multi-tabling a lot, they kind of lose sight of trying to play pots with fish just because they're just playing their hands. And I think it's really important. There's something to be said for just getting as many tables as you can in and, just grinding out the hands and play a solid winning strategy that produces a win rate no matter how many tables you're playing. Um, but you do lose a lot of your edge, I think, in making opponent-specific plays. And some of the most important opponent-specific plays are trying to just get in pots with weaker players. I think some people have a hard time playing hands that, are not uh, group 1 hands or group 2 hands, whatever you want to call them, in pre-flop hand charts. And I think that a lot of hand charts and uh, strategy books have in some ways held people back a lot because a lot of people are playing by specific rules and uh, guidelines that have been set out by other players. Here on the bottom left, I make a very standard c-bet and a very standard 2-barrel with a flush draw on this board. I think that he's calling the flop with a ton of hands that cannot call the turn or very likely not call the turn, like 6-7 or pocket 8s or something like that. The queen helps my cause quite a bit. That's a spot that's probably a good 2-barrel with a lot of hands, but given that I have the flush draw, it's extremely standard. But anyways, back to what I was saying. I think that, and even 5 deuce suited there, I could have played in the big blind on the bottom right. Probably would have been a little bit loose. And here in the bottom left, I'm making a light 3-bet. I guess I'm not. But I was considering it, and I think it would have been fine. I haven't been doing a ton of it. I think it would get a decent amount of respect. Anyways, yeah, I just think that one realization I had, I don't know, at some point last year was, and it was talking to my friend Z, who is You're in Danger on Full Tilt, and we were talking through some hands, and I would do a little bit of it, but it was mostly Z. He would say things like, well, I did this because of some reason, and he would cite like a rule that he'd learned, like 3 years ago from, like 2+2 or like one of the books or something like that. And I just realized that it's kind of funny that people are, still playing by rules that they were taught by people that are much worse players than them. Not to say that a lot of the people teaching were bad players, but guys like Z's a world-class player, and I think that if you want to get to um, a really high level of play, you have to start figuring things out on your own that other people don't know, and thinking on your own, and not just playing by the same rules everybody else is playing by, and by rules that have been laid out by people that likely don't have the edge that you have in the games you play. So I forget. I guess all that stemmed from me playing like 5-8 offsuit against Mr. Cup. But like I was saying, yeah, playing position and playing opponent specific is huge in big bet poker, both in PLO and no limit. Weird spot on the bottom right. There's a cold 4-bet. Under the gun raise, under the gun +1, 3-bet, under the gun +2. Cold 4-bet small. And it looks to be committing. I mean, not necessarily, but might be committing. The thing is, I wouldn't expect, given Mr. Cup's stack, and given that he hasn't like opened for pot under the gun very often, I'd expect him to have a decent hand. And I expect Silent Warrior, or is that Sliant Warrior? I don't know. Maybe he made a typo. But I wouldn't expect him to 3-bet that light, given that he's basically committed to calling a shove here, and can expect to get called by the weaker player very, very often. So I expect him to have a lot of ace king, ace queen, queens plus type hands, maybe jacks, tens. Um, and so then I expect the four better to very likely have a super premium hand. And I think I remember this. Uh, the four better ended up folding. So I mean, really, I don't know. Like by my description, it seemed kind of bad just because I was saying that the three betters range was very very strong. But I'm very very impressed that this player is capable of four betting in that spot and folding. And although it might not necessarily be profitable in this spot against this specific player, which I don't know, it might be, it might not be. Um, as opponents get tougher and people become good hand readers or great hand readers, and people are playing a lot more aggressively and closer to game theory optimal, it's really important to have the ability to be four bet folding there, and I don't know many players that have that in their game. So, granted, that's a spot that doesn't come up that often, but he lost money, but I was very impressed at the time by that play. Whether or not it was plus EV in the moment, um, didn't think that any 500 3-6 players did that. So here on the top right, very easy four bet, obviously with double suited aces. This is a great spot, and I would be four betting with a lot of hands here. Not a lot of hands that be folding to a five bet, but just a lot of strong hands. And this is a pretty gross flop, a very easy check back for me. Um, there's some players you can make a small bet against, which just the type of players that are never going to be bluff raising and just not going to be raising that light. But I have my two backdoor flush draws I want to see, and this is a board that's pretty gross. So I'm going to check it back. And again on the turn, I'm going to check it back. I just think it's pretty likely that, I can't rep anything, and at the same time, it's just too likely that he can have a combo draw or a very made strong hand that can check raise me. And now on the river, given that he's checked twice pretty quickly, and a lot of players, I don't know a lot about Stewart again, but I think a lot of players have their three bet range very high card heavy. So I think it's pretty likely he has like a hand like kings or queens, or likely enough, or like ace king 10x, ace king jack 10, that I just go for value on this river. People don't play tricky enough, in my opinion, to make that a bad play. He did have single suited kings, which, um, without sounding too arrogant, against a player as strong as me, I think is a very bad three bet out of position. I think that you need to be playing against a very weak player to make that a profitable three bet out of position. In position all day, it's fine against anybody this deep, but out of position this deep against a player who's capable of bluff raising flops and capable of four betting light, and going for thin value and things like that is just really ugly, in my opinion. Okay, so here I get FPS on the top left. I don't like my play. It's checked to me. Granted, I say all the time I like to be capable of anything. It's checked to me on the button, um, in a four-way raise pot on the top left, and I check behind with top set and a backdoor flush draw. I remember this. I remember this hand, and I remember at the time my reasoning was, I'm never getting check raised by a hand that is not, at least in decent shape against me. I will get check called a lot, or a decent amount, but on a draw heavy board, I wasn't like super excited about. I shouldn't say super excited. Obviously, I'm excited about getting it in, but I don't expect to be getting it in with worse very often. I don't even think that people would be check raising a bottom set there to get in unless they have like combo draw with it of some kind. Still though, I want to be betting this flop a lot when check two in position this deep, so I really think I need at least 95% of the time I need top set in my range when I have it. And yeah, I just really don't like my check back. Um, Another problem with it is there are not many turns. If this were a board like um, King 7-6 with two clubs, I'd like it a lot more if I had to set a kings, because then on like a turn jack, when somebody leads into me, I'm very happily raised getting it in. Whereas here, um, a lot of the times, since it's four-way, it's very likely somebody can turn higher set to the point where, I mean, if they lead into me, I can raise and get it in, but I might not be doing too well against their range when that's the case. Um, and there are a ton of draws. Any card below a nine brings a straight, and there are the clubs that bring a flush. So there are not many turns that I can get a lot of money into the pot happily. So I'd much prefer this with top set on a different board, and I don't like my check behind. Here in the bottom left, I fold to a 3-bet with 10-8 suited. That's a hand that I call 3-bets with quite a bit, but when I raise under the gun, oh, I must have not. Yeah, I must have misread my hand, and that's why I made that play. I'm not sure if I thought I had like, wow, I must have really not been paying attention. Like Queen Jack 7 or something like that. Um, let's see where my mouse. I'm curious where my mouse goes if I'm like doing something else at the time. I don't think I was doing anything other than playing, but that's really inexcusable mistake to not realize you have top set. Wow. Now I'm really curious how often I do that. I hope I don't do that often at all. But that's terrible. So yeah, I would not recommend. And I looked back at the hand. I don't know if I don't remember that, so I don't think I figured it out even looking back. I have to look back again. Now I'm worried that like I'm seeing it wrong now, because that's so weird to me that I didn't notice at the time. Even after looking back, I don't. Wow, it's tough because I want to say I've never done that before, but who knows? Because I had no idea I did it this time. So don't check back and then fold top set to 1-bet. I'm just trying to show you a play that you shouldn't make. And here on the bottom left, I'm going to 3-bet. Obviously not a great hand, but I haven't been 3-betting much, and I think that it'll get a decent amount of respect if people are paying attention. I assume most of these guys are using HUDs, and their HUDs should show that, yeah, I haven't been 3-betting much this session. And I took that note on the top right of Stewart, making that 3-bet that I didn't like. And here another very loose call on the bottom right against Mr. Cup. I wouldn't hate leading this flop against him, honestly, and I'm just going to check fold here. It's too drawy a board, and I haven't seen him pot c-bet yet without a decent hand, so obviously I'm sure he does it with some air, but I want to be a little careful there. Here on the bottom left, I check back. A fairly coordinated board. I was going to delayed c-bet if I was checked too. But I just think it's a board that when he calls out of the blinds, I'm getting a lot of action on this flop, and there's nothing wrong with giving up with air. I think most people think they have to c-bet when they don't have a very good chance to win at showdown, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, if he's going to be calling or raising, 60% of the time, or 70% of the time, you can't profitably c-bet. Well, I mean, unless you're planning on taking it away later and think that your odds of that are pretty high. But for simplicity's sake, you just, yeah, if he's giving you action on the flop that often, you can't c-bet. And I think King Jack 8 just has so many, nails his range as far as pairs and then gutters, open-enders, things like that. Mr. Cup gets it in with aces and holds. Think I remember looking back at this hand, yeah, because I'm curious how he played it. So he called pre-flop and then check raised the flop. So it's important to note that he, is tricky, slow played pre-flop. Usually, a lot of weak players I'd expect him to limp, but then I'd expect him to limp re-raise or like limp min re-raise, something like that. Here on the bottom left, I call in the big blind with ace-jack suited. It's fairly standard for me. I think it's the right play. It just plays really well on flops, and you hate to get 4-bet when you have a hand like this against a player who's not 4-betting super light. So I check call the flop. I don't think too much to say there. And turn goes check, check. Weird spot because on one hand, it's really tough for me to have air at this point. But on the other, when it's really tough for me to have air, if I did somehow show up with air, I would be making a bluff here. So I think I just have to make a bluff and hope he makes a hero call. Or, has like a worse jack that wasn't going to value bet, or tens that wasn't going to value bet, something like that. I think that, checking checking is a good play for my range, or as far as, most of the time when I check there, I'm going to have under pairs, so he'll be able to value bet me thin and, be able to bluff me. But in that spot, I think in a vacuum, it's probably best to bet until somebody shows you that they're going to play against it very well. So here on the bottom right, I 3-bet with 5 deuce suited, and my reasoning is I think that the initial raiser will think that I'm not 3-betting light because the weaker player's in the pot, so I think he'll fold a decent amount. Mr. Cup I actually did expect to call more often than not, but I expect him to fold a lot of flops. This is not really the best flop for me to make a c-bet on, just because there's so many hands that now have equity that are going to be shoving. I wouldn't hate a bet of like 65 here, but I think that I just need to check fold. And on the top left, I 3-bet with a fairly strong hand in position, and I get 4-bet. And it's not a disaster at all. If he has aces, my equity's still okay, and flops are easy to play. Obviously, that flop is a very easy call, and I believe a slight favorite here, but miss. A little bit of a loose call on the bottom left with 10-7 suited. I don't like to play hands out of position, but I don't know. It was only 20 more. I guess I've been kind of used to playing anti-games, so I've been a little bit looser. But yeah, I don't fault anybody for folding that, and I do like to be tight out of position. Here again, I 4-bet aces, and on the bottom right, I 3-bet with 10-8 suited and nail the flop, and I'll just be making a standard c-bet. And on the top left, not the best flop for me. It's very drawy, but I'm obviously getting it in. He's going to be leading all of his draws here. And he just has a bare flush draw. And I hold up. And he's just, that's a hand that at 100 big blinds against not a great player, you can be 3-betting profitably. And in position all day, you can 3-bet that profitably. But against, I consider myself a tough player. Against a tough player 200 big blinds deep, you just can't profitably 3-bet those hands. Position is just way too powerful in PLO. And against some players that have a very strong 3-betting range, I'll occasionally not 4-bet with aces there, because my aces weren't super strong. I'll 4-bet my super strong aces and then call with some weaker ones. First of all, because my equity edge preflop isn't as big, since they have a ton of Jack 10, 9, 8 double suited type hands and not so many like Ace King, Jack 5 single suited type hands. And just, obviously for the deception value, it's great, because when they do 3-bet with Jack 10, 9, 8 double suited, and the flop comes, yes, this is rare, but when the flop comes Ace 4, 4, a lot of people barrel off there trying to rep aces, and when I have aces, it makes it very easy to call down. And another thing is that you get it in a lot with, let's say we flop an overpair and a gutter, you get it in a lot against pocket kings or pocket queens, where you might not necessarily have gotten it in had you had you 4-bet since they put you on aces. When they don't put you on aces on a flop like, uh, 10, 5, 4 rainbow or with a flush draw, a lot of times they'll bet get in queens because if you don't have a set, they're in okay shape. Um, if you don't have a set or kings or aces, but they think you can't possibly have aces, so they make a bad bet call in spots like that. Or, bet 3-bet all in, something like that. Here on the bottom right, loose-ish open from the cutoff, but I have the Mr. Cup in the big blind. And I bet the flop with mid-pair. And when he bets the turn, I think I actually just have to fold this. His bet is small, but I just don't see him having air ever. I mean, some flush draws are possible. I don't know. I just feel like he has an ace a lot of the time. Or, a straight. I don't really like my call. Arguments for my call: it was a small bet. It could be betting small with a flush draw because he doesn't want to get check raised, things like that. But I think most of the time I'm beat there and don't have the odds to call. And I don't remember that hand, so I don't think I'm being results oriented. I just think this wasn't my best session with the one bluff from last video, then that hand, and then obviously my check fold with tough set. For those of you who are no limit players or trying to learn PLO, or hopefully it's those of you that are convinced to try to learn PLO by this video, I highly suggest running a lot of equities. And I think getting I'm not affiliated with any kind of software, but getting like Hold'em Manager or something like that, and running through all the hands that you get all in and checking your equity is really important. Really, really important to your development as a PLO player. Because it is, while it is a game about hand reading and making good value bets and bluffs, a lot of the times it's a game about pushing your equities on early streets and getting money in on early streets with good equities. And there's only so much. The great thing about it is it's something that's really easy to learn on your own. You don't need like a good coach or to watch videos to learn equities. You can just run them. There are a bunch of sites that'll do it, or just in your Poker Tracker or Hold'em Manager, looking back at hands, you can run the equities. But I think that's super, super important to your development as a player. And I'm wrapping up the session. Hope you guys learned a little bit about whichever game you don't play. I probably talked a bit more about PLO just because I was assuming that most of you knew less about it, which is probably the case, and because I think more interesting spots came up. And it's a game with, in some ways it's an easy game, because there aren't as many, I guess, psychological leveling battles, but at the same time it's more complex as far as hand combinations and things to think about as far as future streets playing out. So here on the top left, my standard is to lead. I decided to check to mix it up. No real great reason, but I think it's fine, and I'm going to check call. And great turn for me. So I now have the gutter, top pair, and the nut flush draw. Top pair is not too important if we're getting all in here, but I don't think I have much of a choice. I guess it is a little bit important because if he does have a hand like a low wrap with the flush draw, then I crush it because I have the flush draw and I have top pair. So if we both brick, I win. But really, with my gutter and flush draw, even against a set, my equity's okay, and people will fire too pretty light. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was folding here. He did have top set and a flush draw, but even then my equity's not terrible, and luckily I hit. Obviously, that's not a spot I want to be getting my money in that often, but not horrible. So here on the top right, I check call the flop after raising pre-flop. Again, just kind of to mix it up. and I was going to check shove this turn also. But now, with top two pair, I just check. I think that betting the river is okay, but I'm not expecting a ton of action from worse. I think betting the river probably would have been, I don't know. I just don't expect to get called there, so I check to hopefully induce a bluff. And on the top left, the last hand of the session, I raised with kind of marginal hand under the gun. Call a c-bet with top pair and a gutter and a backdoor flush draw and check it down from there. And his lead with the set and the flush draw is very good. I think that you want to force money in against wraps and top two pair type hands, things like that, or top pair plus open ender. So yeah, that wraps it up. Hope you guys learned some things. Thanks for watching. This has been Phil Galfond from BlueFirePoker.com. Take care.